Tim Phizackerley is a hypnotist, therapist, and mind coach specialising in treatment of addiction, PTSD, and trauma. And he's with us here today. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for having me on, Toby. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Now, you claim to be Britain's fastest hypnotist. What makes you fast? Why are you called that?
There's a couple of reasons for it. It's not an absolute claim, but one of the things that I do in therapy is that certainly prior to the onset of COVID, which has put a serious dampener on the way that hypnotists work, I undertake to do everything in a single session. And sometimes those are long sessions, depends what it is. Everything in that regard is rapid. But also, typically what I'll do with a client when they come into the office is to give them a demonstration of hypnosis so they can see that, we're dealing with something real. And within about 90 seconds, most people, and I'm talking about maybe 90% of them, I can have them, eyes locked shut, glued to the chair, unable to get out, able to offer them money. Those sorts of things, and challenge them. If you say, look, if you can get out of the chair, you can have £50 cash. So that, that's pretty quick. And really, I'm not supposed to be able to do that. But I don't know whether you've been on my website or not, but the videos on there, I've got some very generous therapy clients who've talked about their experience of hypnosis. It's very, very quick. So that's really why.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How come other people aren't able to do it then as fast as you?
Some people do hypnosis quickly, but the thing is that there are lots and lots of different ways to do things. And it depends what method you're using. And I use a method of induction that I devised myself, which you won't find in a book, so I'm the only person doing it that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what's it actually like to be a hypnotist? Is it quite fun work?
It's varied. Like I said, you mentioned on your introduction, one of the things that I work on a lot is things like chronic alcohol addiction, and I wouldn't have expected that would be fun, but actually it's turned out to be a lot of fun, and I've met some wonderful people doing it. But the calls that come in can be a bit strange. And you never know what somebody's going to ask you to do. That doesn't mean to say for you, you're not necessarily going to do it, but some of the requests are a bit weird, and some of the things that people are struggling with are a bit strange as well. So you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I guess it must be quite rewarding to be able to help people with addictions, because these addictions are kind of ruining their lives. So it's great to fix someone's life in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as a partnership.
Yeah.
Although I'm using techniques and so forth in order to help somebody, there's a lot of collaboration involved in doing that.
Yeah.
And I need somebody to come in and be willing to follow instructions if I'm going to be able to help them. But yeah, it can be extremely rewarding. It's not without its challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And how effective is hypnosis to help somebody with an addiction? Because you mentioned the collaboration there. I take it they have to want to give up the addiction.
Yeah, they've definitely got to want to give up the addiction. The thing is, one of the things that people don't get about hypnosis, and this is partly down to hypnotherapists and the shoddy messages that they're sending out, and also things like TV and movies, is that even if you get somebody into the deep state, a really, really good pliant hypnotic state, responding to practically every suggestion, somebody can pull themselves out of that at any time, and they can also reject suggestions if they want to. If you give somebody a suggestion, they really don't want it, they'll just snap out of hypnosis. So that's why you really need somebody on board. So you're never going to force somebody to do something they don't want to do. You can coax them, you can cajole them, you can encourage them, but ultimately, if they don't want to do it, then you're onto a loser. So really, you need to know that somebody wants the help in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess they probably wouldn't come to you and get help if they didn't want it.
Well, they certainly wouldn't come to me if they didn't want it, because I'm more expensive than most hypnotherapists.
Yeah.
So, and in that regard, I'm quite fortunate because the people that are looking for the sort of rock bottom prices go elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And can hypnosis sometimes be dangerous for people?
I would say, for the most part, no. I mean, obviously, it is a powerful tool. So when you're using it, you need to be careful and you need to be mindful of what you're actually saying to somebody.
Yeah.
I think if you were to scour the hypnotic literature, you would be hard pressed to find anybody who's been, sort of significantly adversely affected. That's not to say, though, that some hypnotherapists aren't doing certain stupid things and things that I definitely wouldn't recommend. So it's one of those things. A degree of common sense is important, both on the part of the client and on the part of the hypnotherapist.
Yeah. And how do we know that hypnosis is actually real and it's not all just actors and stooges?
Well, if you would come to my office, I would show you that it was real. But the probably the best explanation I can give you of that is that hypnosis is about the use of suggestion. It's most fundamental. That's basically what it boils down to. It's using suggestion in order to change the way somebody perceives reality. Yeah. And that might be about themselves or about the world about them. If they've got a phobia, you want them to perceive whatever the cause of that phobia is in a different way than the way they currently are, so they don't have that extreme reaction. And the only way you can do that is by describing things differently than the way they currently experience them and see them.
Yeah.
And to do that, you use words and suggestion. And so hypnosis is basically about taking somebody's natural level of suggestibility, and we're all suggestible. That's why we have things like propaganda and news agencies sometimes, but heightening it. Yeah. So if you are capable of learning something, and every school child that goes into school has all sorts of things suggested to them, and you come out thinking maybe a different way than you did when you went in, then you know that hypnosis could work for you, because it's about assimilating information. And if I can give you a really simple example, if I were to get a hammer and hit myself on the head with it, that hammer would feel hard and solid. Yeah. But a child going into, I don't know what year they would teach this in, chemistry, physics, whatever, being shown what an atom looks like, which is nearly all empty space. And a teacher says, look, you've got this tiny little nucleus in the middle and you've got electrons miles away over here. It's 99.999% empty space. The children come out of those lessons believing that to be true, and I'm not saying it isn't, but they come out believing that to be true, even though their direct experience is of everything around them being solid.
Yeah. And are people able to hypnotize themselves?
Yes, you can, but you've got to go about it the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why hypnotherapists are useful. As long as they know what they're doing and as long as they're good at their job, one of the benefits of a hypnotherapist is that obviously they're doing, unless they're part-time, if they're full-time, they're doing it day in, day out. It's something they get very good at, and they know the kinds of suggestions that typically will produce results. If somebody's doing self-hypnosis, firstly, they haven't got the experience necessarily to do that, but also one of the things that you want people to do as part of the hypnotic process is to have their conscious mind take a back seat. And if you are trying to do something for yourself, it's very difficult to consciously give yourself suggestions whilst at the same time having your conscious mind take a back seat.
Yeah.
So it's not possible. But if somebody's going to do that, they need to go about it in the right way. So there are methods of self-hypnosis that work quite well, and it's definitely something that I think everybody should be using. But you got to go about it the right way.
Yeah. So how did you first start to get interested in hypnosis? Because it's a little bit of an unusual thing to be interested in, isn't it?
Oh, I know. I mean, I never expected to become a hypnotherapist or a hypnotist. And I certainly didn't expect ever to be advertising as Britain's fastest and doing the kinds of things that I am. But I used to work as a computer analyst and programmer. And about 20 years ago, my wife became very, very ill, and she was told that she needed a liver transplant. She'd reached a point where she was, because of the condition that she had, which is like a genetic thing. She'd reached a point where she was struggling to eat and drink and keep it down. She was told she needed a transplant, but she wasn't fit enough to have one, and she was sent home basically to die. And we, she was only relatively young at the time. She was in, how old was she? Early 30s. And wasn't a great option. We didn't like the sound of that. So we thought, what if there's no medical option, what can we do? And I remembered reading a book as a teenager about hypnosis, and some of the things that, were recorded in there related to medical conditions. And we thought, well, maybe it's worth a try. Well, anything was worth a try under those circumstances. So we got on the phone and phoned around a few hypnotherapists, and some said, oh, that's definitely not for me. And then others said, oh, yeah, bring her in. I'll have a crack at it. But it was obvious from talking to them that we wouldn't want to. So in the end, I decided that what I would do was treat it like a computer programming job. And I went to the local library, because this was all, the internet was in its infancy, gathered together what information I could about hypnosis, made some recordings, and my wife set to work listening to them. And fortunately, she did manage to, actually fairly quickly, within about 2 weeks, she was eating and drinking more or less normally. And 13 months after that, she went on to have what was the first of 3 transplants. And for us, it's been brilliant, because she's very unusual, my wife. She's a 3-time survivor of terminal illness.
Wow.
And hypnosis has been really, really useful for us in terms of mindset and so forth. So if anybody, I would say, if anybody's dealing with something like that, even if it is just to get your head in the right place, seeing a hypnotherapist, one that seems like they'd be able to help you, is probably a good idea.
Yeah, that's incredible how hypnosis can do so much, and never realised that before.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we talk about the mind and body, but when you think about it, they're both parts of the same system.
Yeah.
There's no sort of line between the one and the other. And you already, most people know from their own experience, if they get very nervous or anxious, they feel it physiologically. You can feel it in your body. So the thoughts that you have are reflected within your physiology. So it's not really a surprise, but certainly if you get somebody into deep hypnosis, if you were to, I haven't done this other than as a demonstration once, when somebody asked me to, but if you get somebody into a deep state of hypnosis and you touch them with something and tell them that it's red hot and that it's going to burn, you can actually bring up a burn on the skin.
Wow.
And that is that shows you just how close the relationship is between our thoughts and the things that are going on in our body. It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And what have been the weirdest things that you've been asked to help people with?
One of the strangest things that I was ever asked to help with was a young lady who was terrified of being hit on the head by a meteorite.
Ooh.
Which sounds ridiculous, and it is, because I don't think you could probably read every newspaper on the planet, you wouldn't find any record of anybody ever being hit by one, and certainly not being killed by one. I think years ago there was a tiny one that landed in somebody's cup of tea, so basically it meant that she just wouldn't leave the house. So for her, it was really serious. And if she did leave the house and get into a car, it was like get out of the house as quickly as possible and bundled into a car. So it had a really far-reaching effect on her life and her lifestyle. And as to how something like that develops in the first place, it's a bit of a question mark. I suppose what I could have done is regress her to find out, but really I was she wanted it fixing, so my job was really to fix it. But so things like that, they are unusual, but there's all sorts. People are afraid of all sorts of things, and it's amazing what people phone up with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those phobias that I think a lot of people have. Maybe not to that extent, but it's an anxiety thing, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something that if you thought about it too much, you'd become consciously aware of.
Yeah.
But there's not many people hide themselves away because of it, certainly.
No, yeah, exactly. Well, if we're interested in checking out all your services everywhere and all your work, where are we able to do that?
Right, okay. Well, the first thing I would say, Toby, is I'll give you my web. I'll tell you how to find me. But I think for most people, if you're going to see a hypnotherapist, the best thing to do is see somebody locally because it's the most convenient. And usually within a sort of 15, 20-mile radius, there'll be somebody who's really good. If somebody, wanted to get in touch with me, all you have to do is go to Google or any other search engine, type in Britain's fastest hypnotist, and it'll take you to my website. And you can watch the videos of people talking about what it's like to be hypnotized very quickly and what the sessions were like. But at the top of that website, I've actually got a free audio which tells people the kinds of things that they should be asking hypnotherapists if they want to see somebody locally, just to make sure they get a good one. Because the training is very, very varied and the quality is very varied, and there are some absolutely brilliant ones and there are some truly appalling ones. And if you're going to get hypnotherapy, paying for it, you want a good one. You don't want an appalling one. So that's why I put that audio on the site. But like I said, for the most part, I encourage people to go elsewhere because it's likely to be cheaper than seeing me. And also, it's more convenient to see somebody just down the road than to travel halfway across the country, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today, then.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure.